Imagine walking into an Oxford pub in the 1930s. The air is filled with the smell of tobacco and the murmur of conversation. But in one corner of the room, there's a group of men discussing things far greater than the day's headlines. They're talking about ancient myths, epic tales, and the power of storytelling. At the center of this group is J.R.R. Tolkien, the man who would go on to create Middle-earth. Next to him sits C.S. Lewis, the mind behind the Chronicles of Narnia. Together, they are part of a brotherhood of writers and intellectuals known as the Inklings, a group that would transform modern literature and elevate the fantasy genre to new heights. This is the story of how Tolkien's brilliance was sharpened in the crucible of fellowship, a story of creativity, collaboration, and the power of friendship. How did this literary group come to be, and how did they help shape some of the greatest works of the 20th century? Let's dive into the untold story of the Inklings and how they helped Tolkien create The Lord of the Rings. The Oxford Connection ****. The story begins at the University of Oxford in the early 1920s. J.R.R. Tolkien had recently returned from the horrors of World War I, where he served in the Battle of the Somme. The war had taken a heavy toll on him, not only physically but emotionally, and he found solace in the quiet halls of Oxford. Tolkien was now a professor of Anglo-Saxon, a scholar deeply immersed in the study of ancient languages and mythologies. It was during his time at Oxford that he crossed paths with C.S. Lewis. Lewis, who taught English literature, had a sharp mind and an even sharper wit. The two men quickly bonded over their shared love of classical literature, ancient myths, and their deep Christian faith. But beyond their academic interests, both men had a strong distaste for the modernist trends in contemporary literature. Modernist writers like James Joyce and Virginia Woolf were breaking away from traditional forms of storytelling, focusing on fragmented narratives and disillusioned characters. Tolkien and Lewis found this trend deeply unsatisfying. They longed for the grand, sweeping narratives of old, stories filled with heroism, morality, and adventure. In short, they wanted to bring back the epic tales that had inspired them as children. And so, one evening, over a pint of beer, Lewis said to Tolkien, "If they won't write the books we want to read, we shall have to write them ourselves." This single statement marked the beginning of a literary revolution. The birth of the Inklings ****. Tolkien and Lewis soon realized they weren't alone in their desire to resurrect the grand narratives of the past. There were others at Oxford who shared their passion for mythology, storytelling, and the deep philosophical questions that literature could explore. With that in mind, they decided to form an informal literary group where like-minded individuals could come together to discuss their works, share ideas, and challenge each other to be better writers. The group became known as the Inklings, and it wasn't long before it grew to include some of the brightest minds at Oxford. Members like Charles Williams, Hugo Dyson, and Owen Barfield joined Tolkien and Lewis in their weekly meetings, which were usually held at the Eagle and Child pub, affectionately known as the Bird and Baby. They would gather around a table, share a drink, and dive into deep discussions about literature, theology, and the nature of storytelling. But these meetings weren't just social gatherings. The Inklings were serious about their craft, and their critiques were famously brutal. As one member put it, "We were no mutual admiration society. Praise for good work was unstinted, but censure for bad work was brutally frank. If you presented a rough draft at an Inklings meeting, you had to be prepared for honest feedback, whether you liked it or not." For Tolkien, this environment was exactly what he needed. He was a perfectionist by nature, often spending years revising and refining his stories. The Inklings gave him the accountability he needed to push forward with his writing. They challenged him to think more deeply about his characters, his world building, and the themes he was exploring. The long journey to Middle-earth ****. While Tolkien had been working on various stories set in his fictional world of Middle-earth for years, it was at the Inklings meetings that The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings began to take shape. Initially, Tolkien viewed The Hobbit as a children's story, something light-hearted and whimsical. But as he continued to develop the world of Middle-earth, the story grew darker, more complex, and filled with rich themes of heroism, sacrifice, and the battle between good and evil. Tolkien would bring rough drafts of his chapters to the Inklings meetings, where they would be read aloud and critiqued by the group. C.S. Lewis, in particular, was a constant source of encouragement. While other members of the group were often harsh in their criticism, Lewis saw the potential in Tolkien's work from the very beginning. He famously said that Tolkien's writing had a beauty which pierces like a sword. Without the Inklings, it's possible that Tolkien might never have finished The Lord of the Rings. He struggled with doubts about his ability to complete such an ambitious project, but the support of his fellow writers kept him moving forward. In a letter to one of his friends, Tolkien admitted that, "Only by Lewis' support and friendship did I ever struggle to the end of the labor. The fellowship of the ring, and of writers ***. One of the central themes of The Lord of the Rings is the idea of fellowship, of individuals coming together to achieve something greater than themselves. In many ways, the Inklings embodied this theme. They weren't just a group of writers, they were a brotherhood. They supported each other, challenged each other, and helped each other grow as both writers and thinkers. It's no coincidence that the bonds of friendship and loyalty are so central to Tolkien's work. His own experiences with the Inklings shaped his view of what it means to collaborate, to be part of a group that shares a common purpose. Just as Frodo had Sam, Merry, Pippin, and Aragorn to help him on his journey, Tolkien had the Inklings to help him on his creative quest. C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia ***. While Tolkien was working on The Lord of the Rings, C.S. Lewis was also crafting his own literary masterpiece, ***The Chronicles of Narnia**. Like Tolkien, Lewis drew heavily on his love of mythology and Christian theology in his writing. And like Tolkien, he relied on the feedback and support of the Inklings to bring his stories to life. The influence of the Inklings can be seen throughout Lewis' work. His ability to weave together profound theological concepts with accessible storytelling was honed in the crucible of the group's discussions. The Inklings helped Lewis refine his ideas, ensuring that his stories would resonate with readers of all ages. The legacy of the Inklings. The Inklings were more than just a group of writers, they were a cultural force. Their influence extended far beyond the walls of the Eagle and Child. Together, they revitalized the fantasy genre and reintroduced the world to the power of myth and storytelling. Today, the works of Tolkien and Lewis continue to inspire new generations of readers, writers, and filmmakers. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings has sold over 100 million copies worldwide, while Lewis' Chronicles of Narnia has captivated millions with its blend of adventure, magic, and Christian allegory. The impact of their work is immeasurable. But perhaps the most important lesson we can take from the Inklings is the value of collaboration. Genius doesn't exist in a vacuum. Creativity thrives in community. Tolkien and Lewis may have been brilliant on their own, but it was the Inklings that pushed them to reach new heights. It was the fellowship of writers, thinkers, and friends that helped them bring their greatest works to life. What we can learn from the Inklings. So, what's the takeaway from the story of the Inklings? It's simple. Surround yourself with people who will challenge you, encourage you, and hold you accountable. Find a community of like-minded individuals who share your passions, and be willing to accept honest feedback. That's how great work is created. For Tolkien, the Inklings were more than just a group of friends. They were the driving force behind his success. Without their support, it's possible that The Lord of the Rings would never have been completed. If you're an aspiring writer, artist, or creator of any kind, take a lesson from the Inklings. Find your fellowship. Seek out those who will push you to be better, who will give you honest critiques, and who will celebrate your successes. Genius is forged in fellowship. The enduring power of fellowship. In the end, the story of the Inklings is a reminder that creativity is a collective endeavor. Tolkien's genius was not just a product of his individual talent, but of the community of thinkers and friends who surrounded him. The Inklings provided the structure, support, and accountability that he needed to bring Middle-earth to life. As we look back on the legacy of Tolkien, Lewis, and the Inklings, we are reminded of the power of collaboration. Creativity is not a solitary journey, it's a shared adventure. And just like Frodo needed his fellowship to complete his quest, we all need a community of fellow travelers to help us reach our goals. Like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Tolkien and the Inklings, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more insights into the lives and works of literary giants, and share this video with fellow fans of Middle-earth, Narnia, and great storytelling. Let's continue the conversation and celebrate the power of fellowship in creativity.